Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm coming back to y'all with another knife review, and this time we're looking at a cold steel knife. This is the model 58M AK-47, and the one you're looking at right now is the GSM Outdoors era AK-47. Okay, so it has the modern texture on the G10, the DLC-coated S35VN blade, of course the triad lock. I would be interested to see if they could do an AK-47 with the Atlas lock. I think that'd be a cool idea. But yeah, now I will say this particular AK-47 is brand new. Haven't carried it, haven't used it. However, I've carried and used a number, probably half a dozen or more different AK-47s throughout my knife collecting life, and I have plenty of experience with Cold Steel's S35VN through my S35VN American Lawman. So I can easily speak to the edge holding capabilities and whatnot of the knife in that way. But we're not just looking at this current generation, which is a Generation 5 AK-47 from Cold Steel. Okay, let me get the box out of the way real quick. In addition to this Generation 5 version, we'll be looking at the Generation 4 version, pre-GSM Outdoors era, an S35VN. I sadly don't have an XHP version of the AK-47. However, we also have the Generation 3 in AUS 8A and the Generation 2 Ultra Lock in G10 and the Generation 1 Ultra Lock in aluminum. And just for an extra added bonus, I've got the Gen 1 version of the Mini AK-47. Do not have the Gen 2 version, which was in XHP steel. However, I have most versions of the Cold Steel AK-47 that have ever been made right here on the table. And I have carried and used all of them except for this most recent version. So how is that for having enough experience with the AK-47 and being able to bring to you in review what I hope will be a very comprehensive look at this model as it's been made throughout the years. I think this is going to be a very, very fun video, probably a longer video. Hopefully my camera doesn't overheat, because I'd hate to sit here yapping for no particular reason. So let's go ahead and get all of these closed up for now. I'm going to start by talking about the current generation version, and we'll bring in these other versions as we go. Actually, I'll just leave them on the table, just because, why not? So let's start with the packaging. If I have the packaging, I like to show it. It just gives you all of our tech specs. 3.5-inch blade, 9-inch overall length, CPM S35VN steel, 5.3 ounces, so they say, 3.5 millimeter thick blade, and a 5.5-inch G10 handle. Okay, and then on the back, we just have all of our warranty information and whatnot. So yeah, cool, there's the box. I don't think anyone really cares, but they do love to advertise it's in a USA steel now. And I want to start by talking about the blade, which that S35VN is a huge selling point for a lot of people. Yes, you can see it's made in Taiwan. Honestly, some of the best knives I own are Taiwanese made. I'm really impressed with the build quality of the stuff coming out of Taiwan. They make a lot of really high-end cutlery. China does as well, don't get me wrong, but Taiwan, in my opinion, is oftentimes on par with or even above Japanese and even sometimes American production. And I will happily say that this GSM Outdoors era AK-47, Taiwanese built, can rival pretty much any American knife in my collection. Very happily. So 3.5-inch blade made out of S35VN steel. S35VN is a very good steel. It's a very, very good steel. It holds an edge for a good amount of time. It's reasonably tough, reasonably rust resistant. It's not that difficult to sharpen, especially because we have such a good relief grind on this, or relief edge. You can see there, it's not super shallow, so it's very easy to touch this up. Now on this current production version, we do have a flat ground blade. Okay, and that is where it differs from every previous generation, which were hollow ground. And again, I'm going to talk about the blades of the others here before too long, as well as the fact that this is a DLC-coated blade. Now, that's worth noting compared to what for the longest time was the most common version of the knife, which had a Teflon blade. Again, I want to talk about little differences as we go, but I'm saying all this to say the blade is excellent. 3.5 inches makes it a great size for EDC, and because we also have a longer handle, we have a good amount of reach for employing this knife in a self-defense role. Okay, we have kind of a bayonet-style clip point blade, which is a great utility blade. I mean, it comes to a very fine tip, so it's excellent for penetrating your clamshell packages and your Amazon bubble mailers and whatever else you're trying to get into. This will do the job quite well. The high flat grind on this does allow it to slice incredibly well. Okay, I have done a little bit of cardboard testing with this, not a whole hell of a lot, just a little bit, because I didn't feel the need to put too much use on this particular knife. Again, I've got a lot of experience with my lawman to get the idea for Cold Steel's heat treat. But it's a great performing blade. It slices really well, and I think you're going to be very happy with the S35VN. Coincidentally, my Generation 4 version is also in S35VN. This is pre-GSM Outdoors, and I do have quite a bit of cutting experience with this, and I can say that I don't notice a difference in edge retention between this and post-GSM Outdoors S35VN. I think it's all probably getting sourced from the same place, all being heat treated the same way. So, yes, definitely a good steel. Again, bringing in the Generation 4 against the Generation 5 to show you some differences. This is a hollow grind. This is a flat grind. Slight difference on that DLC finish. But I think one of the most interesting points or things to point out between these two different generations is if we look at the blades side by side, lining them up, right? You'll see that on the GSM Outdoors era version, it thins out and then flares out towards the tip, whereas on the Generation 4, it doesn't flare out towards the tip. And that is also true with the old AUS 8 version. Now, what GSM Outdoors is doing here is they are hearkening back to the Generation 1 and 2 models, which also had a narrower blade that flared out again towards the tip. So they're bringing back design cues from the Generation 1 and Generation 2 versions of the AK-47 for their current Generation 5 version, which I think is really interesting, because what that results in is a stouter tip, which is going to be a more durable tip, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. So since I've talked about the blade so much on this version, let's go over the others really quickly. DLC-coated S35VN hollow ground blade on this Generation 4. Teflon-coated AUS 8A on this Generation 3. Teflon-coated AUS 8A on this Generation 2. And bead-blasted AUS 8A on this Generation 1. And the blades are still fairly different. Because it's going to give some contrast, I'll bring this one in. Are still fairly different between the Generation 1 and 2s versus the later generations. We lose this bayonet-style fuller, which is a little bit sad. They've changed the plate a bit. The new plate is actually significantly better, in my opinion. And the blade, I'm not entirely sure, but it feels like it's less wide on the modern versions. Yeah, definitely less wide. This was a broader blade versus this is a slightly skinnier blade. And again, hollow grinding on these old Generation 1 and Generation 2 versions of the AK-47, as well as the Generation 3 and 4. The Generation 5 is the first one to introduce this high flat grind. Okay. Haven't talked about the Mini all that much. Let's go ahead and bring the Mini AK-47 in real quick. Again, this one in AUS 8, 2 3/4 inch blade, and it is basically just a shrunken down version of the full size. What this is a much better EDC size, in my opinion. I think a lot of people do prefer a slightly smaller EDC blade, and this one does the job incredibly well for that. It still gives you all the great penetrative, actually even more penetrative on this tip. It's an even sharper tip. Great slicing blade. I have EDC'd this thing and used it, and it has performed quite well. So that's the Mini. It's very hard to talk about this many knives, but I want to try and point all the different stuff out. It's mostly a review on this current generation version, but again, I want to reference these older ones as we go. All right, so we do have a triad lock on the Generation 5, 4, and 3, as well as the Mini. Generation 1 and 2 had the Ultra Lock, which was kind of their version of the Benchmade Axis Lock. And definitely a difference in the lockup. I do prefer the Triad Lock overall versus the Ultra Locks. However, I do have some issues with Triad Locks, and I'm probably going to piss the Cold Steel fans off a little bit, and that is, I haven't found them to be overly consistent. The tension on this one is really, really strong, but if I go back to this one, really, really strong. But let me grab my Recon 1 real quick. Okay, here is my heavily modified XHP Recon 1. Okay, great knife. Strip the coating off the blade, put a snaggletooth on it, change out the hardware for a larger pivot point, have the snaggletooth karambit loop on the end here. Great knife. Love this knife. However, when I say it's not consistent, I can easily, with just my pointer finger, disengage this particular triad lock. I can't do that on some of the others. The other issue I have with the triad lock is it will stick on some of my knives. Like here's my Generation 3. Whoop, what is going on? My Generation 3 AK-47. And I noticed this a second ago. This one has stuck. And I have to use quite a bit of force to get it unstuck. And it's not consistent. Sometimes it'll stick, stuck again. And sometimes it won't. And this has been used a lot. So this is not from being new. This has been used and carried a hell of a lot. And I'm still getting lock stick on this. But this is another one that oftentimes I can just, with my pointer finger, depress the lock, and not as easily as my Recon 1, but depress the lock and open and close it. Opening it easier than closing it, but still, it shows an inconsistency in spring strength. You can see that lock bar sitting a little proud. And in the case of this one, it's just not the best tension. It's super easy to kind of get that to come open, whereas on this Generation 5, much stronger spring. And so it's not, this is original cold steel, so it's not like, you know, well, the quality of the old ones was just crappy. Old cold steel is generally considered by most to be better than the new cold steel. I haven't necessarily found that true, but I think it's interesting because it shows inconsistencies within the lock. And again, it's really weird. Sometimes this one will stick. I find that if I really flick this one, the lock doesn't stick, but if I'm kind of soft with it, then the lock likes to stick a little bit more. But it's not a consistent thing every time. So I like the triad lock, but it has quirks. Lockup, bank vault on this one. No play any direction. Generation 4. Little bit of up and down. Tight side to side. Generation 3. Tight, tight. Mini. Tight in every direction. And this triad lock I can also depress with just my pointer finger. So, again, all stuff worth noting. What about the Ultra Lock from Cold Steel? Let me close these up so I'm not going to accidentally cut myself as I talk about the Generation 1 and 2s. Well, the Ultra Lock is definitely different. I'll say this. The lockup, bank vault tight on this Generation 2. Little tiny bit of side to side on this Generation 1. I can adjust it at the pivot point, though. No up and down, though. So I do find that the Ultra Locks were a solid lockup. As far as the fidget factor, I feel like a lot of people will prefer them because they do have that fun axis lock kind of thing going on where you can just flick them open and closed once you break them in. This Generation 1 is more used and carried, and I do actually carry this one. This is my favorite out of all of my AK-47s. This one is my favorite, and it's really well broken in. This Generation 2 is basically brand new, and it's not as smooth. I mean, I can get it, but I have to use significantly more wrist action. So you will have to break them in. That said, which do I prefer between the Ultra Lock and the Triad Lock? I do prefer the Triad Lock. I think it's a stronger lock. I think it's a better lock. I think it's less likely to fail because just like an Axis lock, your Omega spring in this can break, and good luck finding a replacement because the design is slightly different from the Benchmade Axis lock. All right, let's talk about the I talked about the lockup. Deployment is fast. Okay, I find that these do deploy really quickly with that thumb plate. Again, I'll show you all of them. Oh, slight mishap on that one. I find the deployment to be satisfactory on all of them. I don't mind the thumb plate. And an added upside to that is that they wave out of the pocket. They will catch your pocket and wave open. Not as efficiently or elegantly as an Emerson wave feature, but well enough. It does work, and I've almost never had them fail. I will say that I find that while I do like the thumb plate, it might be just slightly narrow. I do sometimes slip off of it or fail to get a good purchase on it, just like that and that. But overall, I do I do like the thumb plate. I think it's fine. It's just a matter of getting practiced with it versus a thumb stud or a thumb hole. So not a huge issue. Okay, not a big deal. Let's talk handles, because this is another area where a lot of things differ. Okay, I'll use the Mini to show this. Here's the texturing on the G10 that was found with the Generation 2 and the Generation 3 era of cold steel. It's that really aggressive, really tractionable G10. Okay, and even after many years, it's still very aggressive and still very highly textured. Still has a good grip. This is very different, for one, from the aluminum of the Generation 1. Talk about that in a minute. But also from the GSM Outdoors era G10. This is a more standard fine texture G10, and it's significantly slicker. I mean, it provides decent traction, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing compared to this G10. And I like this G10 a hell of a lot more. I find this to be one of the biggest downgrades for the modern generation AK-47s. Again, let's bring in this Generation 4 version because the green will contrast. This just grips so much better, and I like it a hell of a lot more. So, a bit of a miss on that for the GSM Outdoors era version. It's not a huge deal. It's fine. It's just not my preference. The Generation 1 obviously is a 6061 T6 aluminum handle, which, you know, significantly slicker. Also causes this knife to be significantly heavier. And that's another thing I want to kind of do real quick is let's put all these aside, and we're going to go through these weight-wise, generation by generation, because I think this is really interesting, because there is a bigger difference in weight than I think most people would expect. Let's get the Mini out of the way first, because it's kind of the outlier. 2.8 ounces. Now let's go for the Generation 1, aluminum handled Ultra Lock. 7 ounces on the dot. Generation 2, G10 handled Ultra Lock. 6.57. Generation 3, G10. 5.35. Generation 4, G10. 5.21. Generation 5, G10. 5.56. So we see differences in the weight between every single one of these. And that's really interesting because these three, we get these older ones out of the way, these three should be mostly the same knife, but we have differences in the weight. For some reason, this particular green G10 version in S35VN pre-GSM is lighter than this AUS-8 pre-GSM AK-47. Not by a lot, but by a little bit. And then meanwhile, the GSM Outdoors era version is heavier than both. And it does feel it in hand. I want to state that. This does feel lighter holding it than this. And I think that extra weight is coming, again, from that blade thickening out towards the tip, as you can see against this green handle Generation 4. I think that added steel is where that added weight is coming from. By the way, there's your pommel. Another difference on generations. On the Generations 3, 4, and 5, it is an aluminum pommel. Whereas on the Generations 1 and 2, it was a grivery or grivery pommel. And these were known for breaking on the older ones. So much so that there's replacement parts you can buy out there that are a little more aggressive. These, good luck breaking this aluminum pommel, guys. The ergonomics on these are fantastic. Caveat. And that's because, again, there's generational differences. If we look at the Generation 5, 4, and 3, the ergonomics are identical between all three of these knives. Okay, they all fit very nicely in the hand. Everything is rounded. They fit my hand really well. Maybe slightly better radiusing on the Generation 4 versus Generation 5. Generation 3 to Gen 4, identical. These all feel really good. Generation 2, this G10 handle is boxy. It's really squared off. It's really boxy. It's not super uncomfortable, but it's not a melt-in-your-hand knife by any means, and I do find it significantly less comfortable. And then the Generation 1 aluminum handle version, it's actually rounded really nicely. I actually find this to be the most ergonomic of the bunch, funnily enough. Then again, let's not forget the poor Mini here. The Mini, also very ergonomic. I also didn't mention the handle size on this one, 4.3-inch handle on this Mini AK-47, also an aluminum pommel on this one. Again, kind of hard to talk about this many knives in one review, but damn it, I'm trying my best. I am trying my best. It might have been better to knock out separate reviews, but nah, you know, I feel like people are coming to know about the AK-47, and one video seems like a better play. Let's talk pocket clips. Again, closing all of these up for safety reasons. The pocket clips on the Generation 3, 4, 5, and Mini are all the same. Okay, it's the exact same design. Slight differences in the logo, but you know, who cares about that? And you can see it is curved with the handle. Now, in all of these generations, you did get a spare clip. I'm not going to pull it out, but it's in the box here for putting on the left-hand side, so it curves with the handle on the lefty side, which is really nice. So you can go left or right-hand carry. The clip tension is incredibly stout on all of these, like really, really strong. And that includes the Mini. So that's a good thing. One thing I don't love too much is you can see that the clip does flare up just a little bit. It's not as bad as on some other designs. You can see actually that on the modern one, it's slightly higher than this Generation 4. So maybe a very small clip design difference. Sorry, this was a Generation 3. Here's the Generation 5. Okay, much better. The Generation 3 is the one that it flares up a little bit higher. And then the Mini, same thing, flares up just slightly higher. Not a huge deal. I don't find that they catch on things, but I do love how stout those clips are. Then the Generation 1 and 2s, we had this aerated clip, which was better in terms of profile. It doesn't stick out as much, and it's still every bit as tight. Now, one downside about the tightness of these clips is with the older G10 design, the one that I like better, these were known to be pocket shredders. And maybe that's why GSM did change the G10 that they used, is they didn't want to shred the pocket. But this tight of a clip in conjunction with that G10 did have a death grip on a lot of people's pockets, and people did report their pants pockets shredding to high hell as a result of carrying their cold steel knives. Not just the AK-47s, but the Lawmans, the Recons, all sorts of knives from cold steel. So that is a bit of a downside for some people. I want to stress that, for some people. So I get it. You know, if you like the newer generations for that smoother G10 for that reason, I'm not going to fault you too much. It makes a lot of sense. So here's the big question. Is it worth it to buy an AK-47 from cold steel? And if so, which generation is worth it? Well, my answer is they're all worth it. I think every single one of these AK-47s I own are worth it. And if you can find the XHP versions, I think those are going to be especially worth it. They're going to hold an edge better than the AUS 8 eras. I think not quite as well, based on my experience with this XHP Recon versus my S35VN American Lawman, which I did compare side by side for testing purposes. Didn't record it, but still. I find that the XHP holds a better edge than the AUS 8. Not quite as good as the S35VN. I would say they're all worth it. The problem you're going to have is that certain older versions are going to be exorbitantly more expensive than the modern production. And that even includes the old AUS 8, because cold steel collectors are out there and they're ravenous, and they want every version. And I'm that way. I want every version of the AK-47. I want to find an XHP Mini. I want to find an XHP of the Generation 4. That way I can own every variant. Although I'd be missing handle color variants, because there's also a desert tan for the S35VN, and then both a green and desert tan of the CTS XHP. So I'd still be missing variants, but I would love to own every version of the AK-47. They're cool knives. But as a result of that, again, you're looking at huge price increases. Price on the AK-47 current production ranges between $85 and $125. It's worth it at any of those price points, in my opinion. It's a fantastic knife. It's tough. It's a workhorse. It is never going to fail you, in my experience. The Generation 4 versions, whether XHP or S35VN, they're highly sought after. It was the last generation of AK-47 made by old cold steel. And they're going to cost you significantly more. Now, at the S35VN performance, no difference. The big difference is going to be that flat grind versus a hollow grind and the texture of the G10. Generation 3, I often see these Gen 3 selling for like $160. Okay, so you're going to pay more. There's that damn triad stick. You're going to pay more for a lesser performing steel. And then the Generation 1s and 2s, oh, forget about it. These things are crazy expensive. I often, and I mean often, see these for $300 to $400. I paid, I think, $185 for my G10 version. I paid a lot just to get it, just for this review. This is my least favorite of my AK-47s. I'm not a huge fan of this Gen 2. I'm going to keep it, but I don't love it. And I got a really good deal on this Generation 1. Someone had listed it on eBay for, I think it was $120, and I shot an offer of like $80, and they accepted immediately. So I got really lucky on this aluminum one. But these ones are typically the most expensive ones I see come up for sale. Maybe, it's hard to say, maybe slightly less so than the G10 version. But yeah, it's pretty close. So the value is high. They're worth it, in my opinion. But if you're looking to use it, to use the knife to really put it through its paces, you can avoid the older versions and just stick with the modern generation. I think that'd be a perfectly fine way to go. All in all, though, I love my AK-47s. I think you would as well. I hope you guys loved this video. I know it was a longer one, but, I mean, come on. Look how many knives we're looking at. What is that, 6 knives? I think the time is pretty decent for that. Well, I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the rest of your day.